All right, so good evening. Thanks to those of you who are joining live and those of you who are watching the recording. I appreciate it. My name is Dr. Josh Franco, your professor of political science here at Cuyamaca College, and welcome to our workshop on holding government accountable. So this workshop is about, or it's a series focused on how individuals inside and outside of government can hold it accountable to the Constitution, federal and state laws, and regulations. This is a series of 16 30-minute workshops every Wednesday from 7:30 to 8 via Zoom. So over the past few weeks, we've covered a lot of ground. We started with student power, local government, and the like, and then we had our spring break. And then for those of you who are in the second 8-week session courses, you're picking up here in the middle of it of this workshop. So you're welcome to go back to the other recordings to kind of get some background if you'd like. But each of these are essentially independent of each other, so you don't need to like watch ones before it in order to kind of pick up in the middle of it all. So today we're in week 10 and we'll be talking about holding state government accountable. So let's go ahead and jump to that presentation or that section. Okay, and I'll go ahead and increase my slides. And of course, it's always always goes to a different screen. So let me close this one. And we'll go to the primary monitor. So from current slide, great. So week 10, holding state government accountable. This is a picture of the California state capitol in Sacramento, California, which is a good distance away from San Diego. As background, I used to work here back in 2007 to 2009. I really enjoyed it, and we'll go ahead and talk about how we can hold it accountable. So by the end of this workshop, you should be able to do the following. First is to identify the California Legislative Information System website. Secondly is to explain how state legislation is presented. And then next is to describe where to contact state level elected officials. So what we're doing with this workshop is shifting from the federal government to the state government. Now, note that holding government accountable doesn't just mean government at the federal or the national level. Right, given that our form of government is a representative democracy within a federalist or federalism system, or a separation between the national and the subnational governments, we also have state and local governments. It's important to note that the state government is closer to us because we, in our case, don't have to fly all the way to Washington, D.C. We can just fly up to Sacramento, and that's a difference of about 5 hours worth of flying. Because state government is closer to us, we may be able to hold it more accountable than the federal government since it's physically and geographically farther away. So what we'll do is we'll shift our focus to California state government. Now, the first thing I'd like to bring to any folks' attention is the California Legislative Information System. This is the website that is the repository of past legislation that was introduced and any laws that were put into effect and any current legislation that's available to us. So what I'll do is I'll exit out of this and I'll go ahead and send us over to the California Legislative Information System. Let me just open a window here. So we'll type it in, the California Legislative Information System. And typically our first option, which is here. Now you might be asking, what's this all about? Well, a couple of things. First, it gives you information about bills, California law, publications of the legislature. So things like the daily file, which tells you what's going on that day in the Capitol, an index of all the topics, things of that nature. We have other resources as well. So links to the California State Senate, California State Assembly, the Legislative Analyst Office, which helps to present independent, nonpartisan research and advice to the legislature. Any subscriptions that you may have based on creating an account, and then any favorites, which in this case would be any bills that you're following. Now, the utility of this is like, say you're someone who's for the first time wanting to get involved in politics and to shape legislation, to make your voice heard. Well, normally what you would do is kind of base it off of your interest or keywords. So let's go ahead and say I'm interested in community colleges. So I'll type it in here in the keywords. And we see that there's over 1,500 bills that are returned to us. And we'll go ahead and choose one of these first ones. So I'll click on SB893 by Senator Becker. And we'll see some background information. So this is a bill by the senator about San Mateo Community College District and the California College Promise. And what you'll see here is like existing law and what this bill would particularly do. So I'm going to go ahead and have this read to us to give a little bit of context.
This bill would authorize the San Mateo County Community College District to charge students an enrollment fee less than $46 per unit per semester. If the San Mateo County Community College District charges a fee rate less than $46 per unit per semester, the bill would require the governing board of the Community College District to adopt a policy that establishes eligibility requirements for fee rate modifications, as specified, and a requirement to prepare a fiscal impact statement, including a 3-year projection of the fiscal impact of fee rate modifications on the Community College District, as specified. The bill would specify that the San Mateo County Community College District is not eligible for state reimbursement for the difference between the fee rate charged and the $46 per unit per semester enrollment fee. The bill would require the San Mateo County Community College District to only provide the fee rate modification to students who reside within the boundary of the Community College District.
So this is a piece of legislation about whether or not this particular district can charge a lower per unit fee. And it sounds like they're not eligible to ask the state to backfill it. So it's interesting because like, where are they getting the money to be able to make it less costly for students on a per unit basis? But say we're interested in this bill and we want to engage with the state legislature on it. We obviously could call Senator Becker's office and say, hey, we have an opinion about this. We could also use other mechanisms by which to communicate our concerns, either say our Student Senate for California Community Colleges, which is a statewide organization, or in my case, it'd be the American Federation of Teachers, which is a union that represents me at the state level, or I could just do it as a, as an individual person who has an interest in this topic. And the way to do it would be to send comments to the author after creating a login. So this is one way that you can hold the government accountable at the state levels, because you can see what they're doing, what ideas, what legislation they're discussing, debating, deliberating, and voting on. Now, in addition to the California Legislative Information website, it's important to note how to read the legislation itself. And I give an example here to show that what's really great about working in California state government, especially in the legislature, is that they're very clear as to what the changes are to existing law. So what we'll do is we'll go back to the Becker bill and take a look at what's happening. So anytime there's existing legislation or existing laws, we want to see how existing law is being changed by a bill, in this case, SB or Senate Bill 893. So when we have blue text, we know that they're adding language, and when we have strike through red text, we know that they're subtracting language. So here, this Legislative Council Digest gives you like background information. And then if there's any changes to it, we'll see here it in blue. And as we scroll down, we'll start to see that we have the enactment clause and what changes are being made to existing law. So here they're kind of crossing some things out. They're adding a whole bunch of new lines here. And it seems like they're changing the timeframes in which that would work. So not too many subtractions from existing law. If anything, it looks to be more additions to existing law. Now, this is pretty fascinating to us because we can see what a legislator, a state senator, or state assembly person is proposing to make different in existing law. Now let's go ahead and take a look for another bill to see if we can find one that is, let's say, subtractive, to see if it's taking away things from existing law. So here's an example. This is an act to read. Instead of this part, they changed it. They took out this language here and added pathways to biotechnology programs. And this seems to be some existing language in the Legislative Council Digest, and they took it all out. And here they're adding a whole bunch of new language and then striking out all this prior language. And either this is existing law or this was a part of the original bill. So again, we see how changes are being made. Now, why is this important for holding government accountable? Well, one, you can see it. Two, you can opine on it or give your feedback on it. Three, you can work with interest groups or lobbying groups at the local or at the state level to help give input into this process. And three, you can obviously directly lobby by going to Sacramento and talking with either the legislators themselves or their staff members and giving your input on this process. Now, the reason I like to emphasize that the importance of seeing the changes to law is because when I worked in the federal government in the US Congress, they don't do this. And they actually will say, like in writing, we are removing this section of this existing law, striking from this word down to this word. And you're just like, what are you guys talking about? So it actually requires more translation and more effort on the staff and the legislators to kind of see what's going on at the federal level. But here in California, they, I think, are more transparent about what changes are being made to existing law. and it helps kind of us regular folks who want to be engaged or at least aware of the legislative process and outcomes to be able to contribute our opinions and thoughts on it. So that's an important way of reading proposed bills as how they suggest or are going to be changing existing law. Now, in addition to state government, it's important to note that it's large, it's vast, it's complicated. And here's an organizational chart. It's kind of hard to read, but the point is to say like just how complicated state government is. And let's see if the org chart is still available to us on this link. So we'll give it a moment to load. This is as June 1st of 2020. And you can just see like people of California at the top, right? We have the power as the folks, and then everything's, at least at the executive branch, operationalized through the governor. And then from there, go down the list of all the complicated entities, departments of or agencies of transportation, environmental protection, Department of Finance, Labor and Workforce Development Agency. And this is all to say that in California, with 40 plus million people, almost $250 billion annual state budget, it's a little complicated, right? But this complication or these complications shouldn't be like, oh my God, like I can't do anything. My voice would never be heard. Obviously, you're gonna have to like pick and choose the issues that you want to focus on and where you want to direct your energies and where you want to direct your lobbying efforts, whether it's at the local level or at the state level, whether it's an executive branch or legislative branch. And then in this case, which part of the executive branch do you want to be engaged with? So an example here I wanted to pull out, this was from, 2 years ago now. There was an article in the Sacramento Bee, which is the state capital newspaper, basically, because it's the Sacramento Bee. And then an article titled "Nonstop Calls and No Answers, Why California Wasn't Prepared for the Surge in Unemployment." Now, you might remember from 2 years ago with the pandemic, everything essentially shut down and people were laid off from their jobs or fired from their jobs because businesses, if they're not open, they're obviously not going to be having the need for employees. So with the shutdown in California at the time, over a few million people basically were filing unemployment claims to the Employment Development Department, or the EDD. And what happened was it just created a giant backlog of requests because EDDs never had to deal with 3 million plus people within the time frame of 6 to 12 weeks losing their job and then having to process their claims for unemployment insurance. About a month, not even a month, but a couple of days later, there was an article again or this case, the Los Angeles Times, were titled "Newsom Administration Refuses to Divulge Nearly $1 billion Contract for Coronavirus Mask." And I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, one, we didn't know the severity of the virus. We just knew people were getting sick and a lot of people were getting into hospitals and many of them were dying above any kind of metric we had seen with other viruses or ailments. Part of the concern was, how do we protect ourselves from a virus? And the natural inclination is to either avoid people in general or to wear a mask when you're out in public or in public spaces. And so in addition to the EDD controversy or the people not being able to get unemployment insurance, there was also this other kind of controversy where, we're going to give the legislative branch was going to give the executive branch the ability to basically sign a contract to manufacture masks so that one, hospital and healthcare workers would have access to them, and then members of public safety and then other, public service and other agencies and their staff would have access to it if they were working with individuals. This generated some controversy, largely because the legislature and the general public didn't know what was going on, right? So then we fast forward to a few more months later, and at this point we're at July of 2020, and another article, in this case Politico, which is a national news organization based in Washington, D.C., they had an article titled "Newsom and Garcetti," and Garcetti is the mayor of Los Angeles, which is the largest municipality in the state of California, face political distress as California locks down again. So if you recall, remember we shut down in March and then things were kind of like getting better. And then we had to like lock down again because there was a surge in the summer. And this also generated controversy because people were upset. People didn't know what's going on. People were getting sick. They were dying. And it was just an overall state of chaos, I think, especially if we're reflecting back on how severe COVID was at the time. And so we fast forward a year later, and we knew that there was an effort to recall Governor Newsom that was put into motion. And it really kind of slowed things down for the governor's administration, because when you have to go run for election before you're up, so in this case, governors are elected every 4 years, and he was elected in 2018, and then you have a recall election in 2020/2021, you kind of like are like, okay, I got to go on the campaign trail. But this is a mechanism by which people attempt to hold the state government accountable, and particularly the governor or any statewide elected official is using the mechanism of a recall, which is basically saying, we're not happy with what an elected official is doing. We want to recall, we want to have a vote to recall them from office. And in this case, fast forward to 2021, or a year ago now, there was enough folks in the state who are upset with what was going on, how the pandemic was rolling out, how the response to rolling out, the lockdowns, all these other things, enough where they gathered petition signatures from members of the public to have a recall election. So obviously we know the outcome of the recall, which is the governor beat back the recall decisively, and now he's up for re-election this year. So we'll see his name on the ballot in June, and then we'll see it again in November of this year. So in addition to this mechanism of the recall and holding state government accountable, we also just have how do you contact these folks and let them know what you think? And I always kind of start with the governor first, because most people think oh, the governor, I can't talk to him. Well, yeah, it's kind of hard to talk to him because he's a busy guy. But if you have a concern, you can raise it. So in this case, you can contact the governor through this webpage, and I'll post a link in the chat in case you want to check it out at some point, and say, I have a comment. So I'm going to go ahead and put my information here. So I'll use my personal address and my subject. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can find education. Continue. And I'm going to say pro. So dear Governor Newsom, say thank you for taking the time to read my message. I'll start here. I believe that community college students should be funded at the same amount as students at the California State University and University of California systems. As community colleges strain with declines in enrollment, this is an opportunity to increase funding per student so as to avoid cuts at the community college level. Thank you again, and sincerely, Josh Franco, PhD. Send that message. And now I have just contacted the governor with my concerns, right? And that's one way of holding them accountable, is by sharing your concerns. And the hope is they respond back with some explanation of how they're addressing this, or make it clear that they're for or against what you're proposing. So we can do that for state senators and state assembly members, and we can do it online, make it easy. So some discussion questions to think about as we wrap up is what are you concerned about, right? What would you tell the governor, right? What would you tell a state senator or state assembly member about what's going on in California today? And the reason I ask these questions is because at the heart of holding state government accountable is you having a genuine concern about almost anything, and you expressing that concern to elected officials, whether it's a statewide, like the governor, or your local legislative representatives, and getting that, just sharing it, getting it off your chest and letting people know this is what's bothering me. This is what's going on. I hope something can be done about it. Now, know that in a democracy like ours, or representative democracy, one person's voice is important, but you have to have a multitude of voices speaking up on an issue. So if you care about it, it's not just about sending this one message, but encouraging your family, your friends, colleagues, others of the public to share their concerns. And as those concerns are shared and it becomes an understanding, and as people build a knowledge base around it, as legislators want to act on it, it starts to become an issue that's at least discussed, if not eventually debated and voted on in the state capitol. And then if it gets moved to, a law, then it becomes a policy for all of the, everyone living in the state. So with that, my hope is that when you're thinking about holding state government accountable, is one, recognizing that it's closer to us, so we have the opportunity to engage it more directly. That when we think about where we start off, we want to get some background information. We go to California Legislative Information System, acknowledging that the state bureaucracy is complex, so that you don't have to bite off more than you can chew. You kind of find one place or entity or issue that you want to focus on. You start to get down into the details, knowing that, when issues are concerning to you, as we saw from the beginning of the pandemic, that these are moments where the public is attempting to hold the elected officials accountable. Realizing that the recall is a mechanism for holding state government accountants directly accountable, obviously through re-elections, normal re-elections as well. And at the end of the day, you can contact your statewide officials or your local legislators and share with them the concerns that you have about what's going on. So with that, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen in and watching. And I look forward to seeing you at our next workshop. So take care and have a great night.